first, let me ask you a question. Can you name this chart? Look closely at the line blasting up and up with no end in sight. Does that line look familiar to you? Some colleagues that I showed this to guessed Zoom, Tesla, and even GameStop, but unfortunately, the correct answer is much, much more menacing to you and to your loved ones. And this might shock you, but you are already all in on this mystery chart, whether you like it or not. So believe me when I say the fallout from what you're seeing will come all the way to your front door. If history is anything to go by, it could very easily be the one difference between you retiring in style or spending the rest of your life feeling destitute, even though you did everything right. Let me tell you what this chart is. It represents the total amount of US dollars in circulation. And just look at how much it skyrocketed last year. This is not new news, but according to some estimates, an alarming 35% of all the American dollars to ever exist were created out of thin air in 2020 alone. Just imagine how much this destroys the value and the purchasing power of your existing savings. The gas that you put in your tank, the clothes on you and your family's backs, the food, housing, and energy needed to survive, prices across the board are now putting a growing strain on millions of Americans' pockets. Meanwhile, every damn dollar that you ever put away was diluted with one stroke of a pen. So bottom line, how much you pay and how much you get are running in opposite directions these days. I'll try my best to stay as apolitical as possible here while speaking about our country, about the Biden administration, and about the Fed. But to be blunt, sharing this time-sensitive information with you is much more important to me than watching my words or being politically correct. Isn't it alarming when the actions of our country's central bankers looks comparable on a chart to the behavior of novice Robinhood traders? Being reckless with their free stimulus checks as they were with GameStop early in 2021. Look at the chart I just showed you. Next to GameStop's price, look at it for yourself between December 2020 and a year later. Sure, just like our economy in general, some folks were benefiting from this flow of money. But for heaven's sake, even children know you can't invent monetary value out of thin air without any consequences. And here's the most alarming part of this. It's only just getting started. CNBC recently reported Biden's multi-pronged or multi-trillion-dollar spending push is still in its infancy. Look, this isn't some abstract theory or paranoia. As you're about to see, it's happened time and time again historically with disastrous effects for everybody involved. And as we both know, it's always the innocent citizens that get left holding the bag. People like you. It's been that way all throughout history. Consider some of the events that our government could be learning from, like King Henry VIII. With his country in chaos after the global pandemic known as the Black Death, King Henry VIII began a campaign of excessive spending of government money. Sound familiar? He debased his people's currency to fund his own selfish agenda. And because of this, the currency's value plummeted by more than 83%. It happened in the Roman Empire too, when egotistical emperors who thought they knew better destroyed their loyal subjects' currency, causing their once great empire to crumble to the ground in the process. A more modern example that you and I have lived through would be what happened in Venezuela. In his first year as Venezuela's president, President Maduro sent their economy slowly spiraling down the toilet due to heavy money printing and spending deficits. In fact, the value of Venezuela's currency, the bolivar, tanked so badly that their central bank, Venezuela's version of the Fed basically, opted to not share their statistics publicly for the first time in history. But the damage was obvious as citizens once again were left holding the bag. A single roll of toilet paper could run you at least $20 in 2018 dollars. 5 pounds of chicken to make for dinner shot up to 14 million bolivars, which is worth about $109 at the time. Mind you, we're talking so much nearly worthless paper that it took a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy one loaf of bread. Although Venezuela, unlike us these days, had cheap gas, affording the parts to maintain and keep fuel tankers and motorists on the road was impossible. A shortage of running tankers meant delayed deliveries. Delayed deliveries meant fuel shortages, which of course trickled down to the public. It wasn't uncommon for motorists to wait in line for hours and hours just to fuel back up. And now America is setting itself up for its own version of everything I've just told you. As I've said, from the grocery store to the gas station to buying a home or even a used car, we have already started to feel the effects of this cash massacre happening right now. And frankly, it could get a lot worse before it gets better. It's not just me saying this. Maybe you heard Ray Dalio recently, the billionaire founder of the world's largest hedge fund. He said, the US dollar is on the verge of devaluation on a level last seen in 1971. And China is threatening the greenback's role as the world's reserve currency. And Stanley Druckenmiller, the billionaire trading genius and architect of the legendary breaking of the British pound back in '92, said, quote, Federal Reserve policy and US deficit spending are setting the US dollar on a path to collapse. He even went on to say it's, quote, more likely than not, the US dollar will lose its status as the global reserve currency. But it doesn't take a billionaire genius to know that we're in some serious trouble here. You've probably already heard the Wall Street Journal and other outlets reporting the American dollar is the weakest it's been in 40 years. Just look at how the dollar's buying power is increasingly sinking like a rock over the years. To put in plain English, the dollar's share of the global reserve is the lowest it's been in nearly 3 decades. If you think things are getting expensive now, look at real estate. I mean, losing our reserve status, like I mentioned, would mean every imported good and service would skyrocket in the blink of an eye. The cost of doing business would also increase. And guess who will be left paying that difference? That's right, we the people. So listen, I made my millions without needing to use academic terminology or pompous language or obscure equations. I just call a spade, and here are the facts. A sound and stable currency is the cornerstone of a healthy country. Safeguarding your wealth is your only protection against a reckless government. And like we just saw, history always proves that. Once they start messing with your money, things go downhill, and they go downhill fast. If this behavior can destroy the mighty Roman Empire, which lasted for well over 1,000 years, have no doubt it can blaze through the wealth of any Americans who don't act immediately. Even though I've been a self-made millionaire since my early 20s, I've never turned my back on regular investors all around the country. People like my friends and family who use their blood, sweat, and tears, their muscle and ingenuity every day to build our country, yet always suffer when the actions of the elites destroy our economy. I believe it's my duty to protect regular people from this reckless disregard for human values. For example, in July of 2007, I sounded the alarm that Wall Street banks were on the verge of tanking. Sure enough, within the next year, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, triggering the biggest single-day crash in Dow Jones history. In more recent times, I called the 2020 market crash before the pandemic was even on our radar, specifically on December 30th, 2019, when in a nutshell, I said, the market is clearly overbought, so I'm publishing a day early to get the word out. Unfortunately, for everyone who wasn't following me at the time, I was right. 2 months later, it was a financial whiplash as the fastest fall in global stock market history unfolded, and it was also the worst crash to happen since 1929. Most average investors were blindsided completely, and millions lost 40% of their retirement in a matter of weeks. In total, I've alerted honest Americans to virtually every major market, top and bottom, like these for more than 25 years, allowing those who listened to protect their hard-earned wealth and grow it substantially in many cases. Just like one of my readers, John W., who said, quote, having lost my job in January, I paid some of my end-of-service money into my trading account and have doubled that value in 1 month. I'm so grateful to Chris. Millions of Americans who didn't have access to my warnings weren't so lucky and had to pay for the recklessness of the 1%. They paid with their livelihoods, their quality of life, their retirements. I'm sure you can remember witnessing your share of financial crises like these unfolding just as well as I can. And unfortunately, we're now at yet another watershed moment in our nation's history, one that looks set to stretch out the American wealth gap even further. Let me just say something. It should never have come to this, because you see, this cash massacre isn't an accident or a natural occurrence. It's policy. I mean, look at this chart. It's not even connected to the pandemic anymore. Just watch the red line, spending, leave the blue line, income, in the dust. In a nutshell, Biden and the Fed printed nearly twice as much what they actually made, to the tune of more than $6 trillion at this point. Probably more by the time you see this. Would you let someone with a budget like this manage your money? I knew better. Even back when I was still one of the youngest money managers in Wall Street history, it feels as though there's some larger, more sinister agenda at play here. Maybe you read the recent Politico article about Joe Biden's free spending. It said, quote, "So far, the defining word of the Biden era is trillion." And USAspending.gov paints a bigger picture, noting spending topped at least $6.8 trillion. That's enough to cover the entire GDP of the UK, Canada, and Russia combined, with more than $1 trillion left to spare. It's almost too vast to get your head around this, right? Let me put it into context. We used our first $1 trillion to overthrow the British imperialists, defeat Hitler and the Nazis, end the Great Depression, build the interstate highway system, put Neil Armstrong on the moon, and still had enough change left over to purchase both Louisiana and Alaska. And again, Biden and his cronies have spent more than 6 times that amount. Look, every day we hear abstract terms tossed about like inflation or quantitative easing. They bore Americans to tears into turning a blind eye to what's really happening. Meanwhile, Washington bureaucrats burn through tax dollars like drunken sailors. But listen to this. They have been fudging these numbers all along. This isn't some conspiracy theory. Even Forbes called BS on the most common measure of inflation in this recent report, asking, quote, "What if we're measuring inflation all wrong?" Inside its pages, they dismissed the most commonly used measure of American inflation, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, and said, quote, "Common sense tells us the Consumer Price Index is not an adequate measure of inflation." Because here's the shocking truth. They tinker with how they measure this infamous CPI all the time. Wouldn't it be great to be able to change the rules that tracked your performance whenever you liked? In fact, when John Williams, a notable independent economist, crunched the numbers using the traditional methods from the 1980s, he found real inflation was approximately 3 times higher than reports. They changed the method of its calculation all the time. Look, I don't want to get in the weeds here, but here's the crucial information that you should know. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, who publishes the CPI, operates under a veil of secrecy. The data used to calculate the CPI is hidden from the public. And over the past 30 years, the government has changed the way it calculates inflation more than 20 times. There's another word for this type of creative accounting. You might have heard of it. Lying. And when you consider the decades of reckless spending combined with these questionable numbers they show us, it's really no surprise this cash massacre is as bad as it is. I truly believe people will look back in years to come and be baffled that we didn't see it coming from a mile away, like Germany's Weimar Republic in the 1920s, where citizens ended up using their ruined currency as wallpaper as it became virtually worthless for anything else. Or Zimbabwe at the turn of the millennium, where the powers that be devalued the currency so badly that they eventually issued $100 trillion bills. Imagine that. Imagine working your backside off for your entire life, only to watch the nest egg that you saved destroyed by a bunch of bureaucrats who you never met? How would you feel waking up in the morning knowing you basically needed to start from scratch all over again? Just like the fudged CPI numbers, conventional wisdom tells regular investors that in order to protect their wealth, they need to, quote, lend the government even more money to waste in the form of bonds, treasury bonds, or have gold bullions hidden around the property somewhere. Let's face it, the past couple of years have been a mess. COVID, the election, cancel culture, the mainstream media, Biden's money helicopter, take your pick. But please do not allow this chaos to shake you out of things that you're doing right, because as we speak, weaker investors with no understanding of history, are handing in their chips, getting out of the market and turning to cash. I firmly believe getting out of the stock market and going entirely into cash is the single worst thing that you can do with your money right now. It's financial suicide. And it's not just me saying this. Let me quote billionaire Ray Dalio again. Quote, "Cash is trash. Get out of cash." He also said that those in cash are, quote, going to feel pretty stupid. Before I started helping regular American investors, I made my millions on Wall Street, and something gets forgotten all the time about people like me. Sure, we know how to make millions of dollars in the stock market, but more importantly, we know the best ways to keep it during uncertain times like this, and grow it too, through booms and busts, recessions, black swan events like COVID, and now the cash massacre.